Well, this is the pilot episode of Football Then and Now, a football podcast show. Me and Chris have obviously took the charts by storm with MMA and boxing with Big Fight Weekly, but I think this could be a bit of a test, mate, because there's a lot of football shows out there, isn't there? But we're hoping to chart with this show, aren't we? But we're intermingling old school football with the modern side of football. Now, there's a lot of negatives with modern football, but we're going to try not to touch on them too much of this. We don't want to be hearing about VAR, FFP as such, Chris, because you hear it across the board. So, yeah, what are your thoughts of us doing this on football?
Well, we've often spoke, haven't we, in private chats about doing something with football because it's our first love. We can talk UFC, MMA, boxing, wrestling all day long, but we were brought up on football first. Everton was our first love. We've followed football, as well as Everton our entire lives. So it makes sense for something that we hold close to our chest, and football is that.
Absolutely. What are some of your earliest memories of football, Chris? Like, can you remember the first time you saw football as a kid?
Obviously, as obviously being family members, we were sort of, introduced to, watching Everton, weren't we? And you watching what you could, because back in those days, it was radio or match of the day. Or sometimes, don't forget, we used to say, turn around now if you don't want to see the results on the news, about 5 seconds before match of the day started. I never understood that. Never. The program you're meant to be watching to find out what the score was or the goals, and they're telling you it before it. I never got it. But, the earliest is like, from what I can really push out would be like, let's say 94, 95, because I think I was a bit more in tune. I love playing football, but I think understanding the sport itself was a bit confusing, a bit, when you were younger. And there was so much things going on, on the telly back then. I think it's hard to struggle to watch one thing. But when you started playing football a lot, like me and you were often playing football on the street, Stuart. I don't think there was ever a time you ever came over to mine, or I ever came over to yours. We were never playing football.
Park Road alleyway was a good one, wasn't it, mate? Then we obviously went to the square, didn't we, at the top? Was it two roads over the square? You introduced me to you need to come up to the square. It's a massive area. We ended up there, didn't we? But just playing in that small enclosed space, towards the back of your garden there in the alleyway, man. Great times.
Using the grids as the goals.
Yes, I do remember. My earliest time, I can remember, I think when Dad was watching, it would have been when John Barnes scored against Brazil. And I think it was maybe late 80s into 90 before the World Cup when he scored that goal, if memory serves. But the first tournament I can really remember was Euro 92. I can remember still being up. And I've got like this memory of Martin Darley, Thomas Brolin causing absolute havoc against England when Graham Taylor was in charge. That'd be my earliest memory, but not really getting into it till about the following year when I switched allegiance and went to Arsenal because they did the cup double. But I think it was more to do with the
fact. Don't bring the negative up.
I've got to, because I think it was more to do with Ian Wright. I just loved Ian Wright, and
he was a class player.
There was a year there where I did come away from the Blues just for a brief period. But glory hunting, I would call it, because he did the league and cup double. I had the shirt. But it was a different time, wasn't it, back then?
I definitely. I think you were so easily influenced, and I think, like kids still are to this day. You know what I mean? You're pulled left, right, and centre. You know, once you really get deep into football, and you know what I mean, and you've got so many different friends to support Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, and you know your family is either blue or red, as you know well know in our family. So you get pulled pillar to post. You know what I mean? And I think you know with our first sort of introduction today, and the players we're going to talk about, you were sort of swayed away watching Everton, and you know it's hard, you know, looking 38 years on and we're still bemoaning about Everton as a football team. But the players we're going to talk about is when you start looking away, and I think going abroad helped me as a kid. And seeing the likes of Barcelona and falling in love with Barcelona and that sort of samba football, because we were so used to dire football at Everton and you know loft it forward and just hope for the best, which I think it's pretty much the same now. But yeah, I mean, I think going abroad helped me, and then it introduced me to so many different players. And you got excited for it. Now, you know, I wouldn't say I've supported Barcelona because obviously Everton's team, but you started following them a bit more, and then you know you start following different teams. Then not like supporting, but the players just catching your eye, and you're always thinking, why haven't we got anyone like that? Where's our silky skills? You know, not Peter Beagrie. I know he could do a bit here and there, like, but yeah, it was. I mean, it's an amazing time to see how things from when we were kids to where we are now. You know what we've seen and what we've fallen in love with.
Absolutely. There's some great players. And I know I'm going to pop a graphic up now for obviously for the video side, but we're going to be in audio form, of course, across all platforms there. But I know how much you admired this lad because I remember you saying about him all the time. And over 700 career goals in just under 1,000 games, which was massive. And it was obviously the great Romario World Cup winner. Obviously, in 94, he wasn't in the team, was he, in 98? But
Yeah, he was injured. He had a muscular injury. I remember rightly because obviously I fell in love with Romario going to Spain when he was playing for Barcelona, and I obviously followed him all the way through. Then, you know, the guy was terrific. He wasn't like, you know what I mean? I know we're going to get on to Ronaldo in a bit because he's definitely going to be up here because he's a legend, and you know we saw him as a young guy from PSV going on to Barcelona. But this man, like, he didn't have the skilky skills, but you know how to put the ball in the back of the net. He had pace, but he just knew, and this is why you see he scored so many goals in you know what I mean, in all different types of leagues as well. You know, people go on about Pele, and Pele was a world class player, but he stayed in Brazil. Romario, you know, Bebeto, and all that came away from Brazil. You know what I mean, and shown really how amazing these Brazilian strikers were. And these, like I say, these are pre Ronaldinho and Ronaldo's and all the silkiness. They just knew where the back of the net was, and it was prolific.
if you look at that 94 tournament as well, I was watching the goals just to jog my memory back. He's running with the ball. He's well outside the area. You know, he's having to cover a lot of ground. You're alluding to his pace there. It was just the amount of ground. Once he started running at you, God help you, because he just had that knack, didn't he? But like you say, ruthless in those areas. But it was him running into space and going past people as well. It's just incredible. And it just remember how good they were, you know, collectively in the tournament, but him especially, and they just looked by far and away the best team in it. I know obviously the final went to penalties with Italy, didn't it? But
Yeah.
They were the best team, you know, when you look at who they were up against and who they came up against in the they played Holland, didn't they? I think it was in the quarters of that. Holland had a good team at the time, so yeah, they were fantastic. But he was just next level, wasn't he? And I think he paved the way for a lot of guys. I don't think he gets enough credit, Chris.
You don't hear about him as much, do you? And I think when you go back to the '94 class of Brazil and the players that were there, and you would say in probably what that in is it 2004 maybe Brazil, you know, they were like elite class players, you know, in the first 11, but you never hear about the '94 class. And I think, as you just said, then they set the standard for the next generation of Brazilians
I
that came
think
through.
I think like the way Barcelona ended up playing, a lot of it came from that Brazilian style that we saw,
Yeah.
which predated it like 14 years before, probably a little bit earlier than that. If you think about the way they were playing, they were actually the ones, weren't they? Before, everyone heralds Barcelona changing the game, but you see a lot
Mhm.
of similarities with the way Brazil were playing, especially in that '94 tournament.
But don't forget as well, the likes of Ronaldo, R9, and Romario, they all went to PSV before they
Yes,
went to La
yeah,
Liga. So PSV obviously had a very good scouting system because they were picking up, these young Brazilians. They were learning their trade in Europe, obviously, because the leagues are different from Brazil to Europe. You know what I mean? And then going on to bigger and better things. So you got his hats off to whoever was the scout system back in the 90s for PSV because they knew obviously all these talents that were coming through.
Bobby Robson deserves a lot of credit, doesn't he? Because obviously he was at both.
Yeah.
I think he brought them through, didn't he? Like you said, obviously scouting as well. He
Mm.
just had an eye. He had an eye for talent, didn't he, Bobby Robson? And like to
Yeah.
have them two, at certain points is just incredible, isn't it? They really did set the stage, the Brazilians, for the European game.
Look at the players he played with. He played with Stoichkov, and you remember Stuart. Stoichkov was at Barca at the same time as him. And I mean, they were fantastic together. And you mean, and you're mixing again. You're looking at two players again, aren't very silky smooth, and what we see now in talented Brazilians and Spanish and what have you. But they were pace setters for their countries because of the amount of goals they scored in straight, and there was all different array of goals they scored, together for Barca. Before he moved on, and they both moved on to other things. And you got to sort of give your hats off to the sort of the system that Barcelona sort of portrayed for these players that come through. Rivaldo's. Obviously Ronaldinho came from Paris, didn't he, and all that. But utter class.
They had some good players, man. Really, really did. It was just they were a pleasure. They were a pleasure to watch. I think they could have won more, really. When you look
With
at the
what they had.
quality of squad they had, they were picking up Copa del Rey's. If they weren't winning the league, if Madrid were winning it, they were still picking, weren't they? Cup Winners' Cup, Copa
Yeah,
del
yeah,
Rey. There was always stuff coming in, wasn't there? But that was testament to Madrid's squad as well, wasn't it, at the time as well?
yeah.
You
But
know, they had,
solid as well. You're completely right. Here's a story for you. I remember. So obviously being abroad and falling in love with Barcelona and Romario and all those sort of samba sort of like early stage of the football and what we now love. And you see Pep with it, obviously growing up with all that. And I remember the radiators were getting put in at our house in Park Road. So I got to stay at Nana's, and you had Sean, Barry, and Andrew, didn't you, at yours? I never understood that. So why didn't I go to yours? But I ended up going to Nana's. And I remember I was in the kitchen, and it was United versus Barcelona in the Champions League in a little telly, the little miniature tellies we used to have back in the 90s. And it was right in the corner. And I'm watching it, and I have my Barcelona top on. And I'm supporting Barcelona. Of course, there's no other English team I would want to follow anyway. And I remember her coming in, and she's like, Christopher, why are you supporting? Why are you supporting them? You should be rooting for your English teams. And I was like, I don't like United, but I, respected them because they won so many Premier Leagues throughout the 90s, and so on. But I was so in love with the style of Barcelona and the players they had, especially Romario. And I remember just like proper going, "Why you should be following English teams?" But we follow an English team, and they were poo. And this was sort of a breakaway of not looking at the negative side of watching Everton. We were watching world class players, which we don't really have at the time at Everton, and not really much since. But it took you away from all that, and with big eyes, thinking, "Holy hell! Like how amazing these players were!" And you got really excited to see them on the telly.
I maintain it. I think I don't want to talk too much about the now because we're in the nostalgia era for us, especially growing up. You're
Mhm.
impressionable. I'd still maintain they were better skilled. They were better skilled than the players now. I think if you've got pace now, you're halfway there. Whereas these guys, technically, I think they were better. And modern fans, younger people to us might disagree with that, but I fully believe that they were better. They were better standard what they could do. I think pace gets you out of a lot of issues these days and can make you. And I know you've got to be able to finish, but I just think the players were better personally. But I know the game's changed.
They were a lot tougher though, Stuart. You know what I mean? There wasn't much rolling around, and you know, obviously they did try and win free kicks, but they weren't to a point where you're seeing it now, where you know they can get a little flick on the back of the heel and they're rolling about five rolls down a fucking hill. When back in those days, you remember what you know how bad the tackles were, and they were ruthless, but they get back up. You know what I mean? There was no crying to the ref, right back up.
I said it about Richarlison the other day. People are booting off behind me. I was like, it was only what he used to do here anyway. He was only doing the same thing. He was rolling around. They were laughing after I said it. And Vicario as well, when it went to VAR, and he was staying down, wanting nothing actually happened to him. I was like, here we go. Like you're saying, they were just built differently. It's a part of the game. It's a part of the game now, unfortunately, isn't it? It really has. But you know, that's why it was better. It was better years ago in that respect, wasn't it, mate?
Yeah, and I think they were a lot more hard working. I'm not saying they're not hard working now, you know, because they got the flashy cars, haven't they, the youngsters, where the older generation were going to the pub and having a pint with the team, weren't they, or the manager and stuff, and eating all loads of crap. You know, they can't do that now because obviously they would never get a pint in because there'd be too many people in the way. But yeah, I think football obviously will evolve. Like every sport has to evolve to a certain standard, I guess, when the world itself is evolving, or you know. But besides going into it more of that, because I feel like my head's going to start in with FFP again. But it was just different, and I think you didn't look at the fouls, did you? You would just look at the glorious goals they scored, or the free kicks. You know, Roberto Carlos. Mihalovic, we saw when he played for Parma and stuff, and you're the one that pointed him out to me. And you know, I mean, he was a top level free kick taker. Stoichkov was another one who was a really good free kick taker when you know Koeman wasn't stealing them off him for Barcelona. But you know, I mean, it was just different. I think you're just looking for fancy football and what would you say, sexy football, I suppose, back then to where it is now.
It's like I still love the game. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not going to berate. It's just it has moved on. I'm moving on, Chris. Now we've alluded to R9, the original Ronaldo, who broke in. He was so young when he broke in, wasn't he? And I think I can remember when we had the Umbro Cup in 1995, and obviously he was involved in that, wasn't he? Or was it? Yeah, it was 95, wasn't it? The tournament, because Goodison had one of the games, didn't they? If memory serves.
Yes, we did.
And he was playing then because we didn't see him in 94, did we? I'm just going to put the graphic up in his Barca kit there.
I had that kit.
Yeah, you did. I remember. But yeah, he broke into the scene. I remember seeing him in that tournament during the off season for the Premier League and just thinking, wow, this kid's amazing. That was the first time I'd seen him. I just thought this lad's going to be something else.
But he was something else, Stuart, and I think I think he was the next evolve Romario, but he had obviously the pace, the strength, but he had the skills to go along with it, and he could beat a man and then repeatedly beat the man before he scored. Class, another one that PSV picked up at a young age. If you go back at like the likes of Championship Manager or FIFA and all that. He's there for PSV, a young lad. Obviously, if you didn't know your European football, you wouldn't really think about him, unless, like you say, unless you saw him in the Umbro Cup at first. But look what what he sort of did throughout his career. It's sad that he got injured, and I think the injuries did tail him at the end, didn't it? And he wasn't that old, but it was that knee, wasn't it? And I think Brazil. Like, he carried Brazil on his back, didn't he, for so many years, and he was forced to play when I don't think he should have been forced to play, and I think that
98, 98, the final, when he was obviously
fit, didn't he?
And he wasn't right, was he? I remember BBC, I remember Match of the Day, Des Lynam, and that was the big thing, wasn't it? He wasn't right for the final, And France, you can't take anything away from France the way they played
Zidane,
the whole
wasn't it?
tournament. But yeah,
Zidane was amazing. Yeah, that
but
night.
it just shows you how prevalent he was, and everything went through him. And the finishing again, you say about Romario when he got a sight a goal, it's just look how many chances get missed by players. Not with him, not with him.
No.
Ruthless, absolutely ruthless.
I remember when United played Real Madrid, and obviously Ronaldo was playing for Real Madrid then, and it was Old Trafford, and he absolutely destroyed the back four, and it did look like he wasn't even like second gear. He made it look so easy, like someone was playing on the computer game as Ronaldo, and he just made it look so easy. He was just a world class player, and I think you can go on with your Lewandowskis and Cristiano Ronaldo and your Kanes. No one matches this gentleman R9 at all in any aspect, because he had it all. I think there's probably one player I'd say was very close. That was Adriano. I think he had the same, but a bit taller. But obviously, again,
it just fell apart for him, didn't it? Because
and he was world class
for Inter Milan.
But this, you know what I mean? Ronaldo played all over Europe. You know what I mean? When we talk about these players, you do feel a bit jealous and envious that we never got these in the Premier League. I still think he would have done the same what he did in Italy and Spain, Ronaldo. But you do when you watch it back then, you were envious. Like, why aren't the top clubs buying these players? Why aren't we seeing Ronaldo in? I suppose at that point would be a Man United t-shirt, because they were obviously ruling the league, weren't they?
I think it was more into the late 90s when the Premier League started ascending and becoming, the dominant league, really, didn't it? It took them however many years from 92 to getting into the back end of the 90s, because I think Spain and Italy still had the foothold, didn't they?
Yes.
You would say in that period. But obviously the Premier League was new. But I do agree, mate, it was such a shame that we didn't get to see him, among others, on domestic shores.
It would have been amazing. Not to play against, our poor Everton defence against Ronaldo would have been disgusting. I would have hated it. Dave Watson against Ronaldo. Oof, Gary Ablett.
It was good. I love Dave Watson. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not belittling him. He had a great career for us, didn't he?
He was blessed with pace, though, was he?
Yeah. He was. Yeah. Sorry, Dave. I've just thrown you under the bus there.
No, we love Dave Watson. Dave Watson was, a terrific captain. Back in the day.
Absolutely. So yeah, Ronaldo, man. And do you know what as well? What was Hector Cooper playing at when he dropped him for Inter Milan? This is going into like the early 2000s now, so I'm coming out the 90s. But he benched him. He did not. I couldn't believe it. And it wasn't as if the fitness, he was in and out, but there was times when he was fit and he wouldn't start him. How can you not start him? I don't know whether it was the Brazilian Argentinian thing going on, but that shouldn't come into it.
No.
Hector Cooper had a funny one on him about that. I couldn't believe it at the time. So how can you not pick him? He's fit. I remember it did not make any sense. He was still like one of the top players in the world.
It's a shame, but then you do get that with certain managers don't click with certain players, I guess. You know what I mean? Maybe there was something in the back for going on between them that we didn't know about at the time. But yeah, you don't drop a player like him. If he's 100% fit, you play him.
It's just incredible.
He was that good, Stuart. Even him being half injured would still score more goals than the majority of players.
And like you say, how many times was he not at full capacity, and he was still scoring goals, wasn't he? That lad, otherworldly, next level, just elite players. Which there's only room for a certain amount of elite players. At any time.
I'd agree. It's a shame to see him now, though, don't you think?
Just he's still involved in football, isn't he? But yeah, it's.
I'm sure he's the owner of Real Valladolid, isn't he?
Yes. Via the lid, yeah.
But he's a bit of a chunky monkey now as R9. But you know what? He still rings around me, so it doesn't really matter.
It's what he can impart on the players as well, especially the strikers and the attacking players. that knowledge is just, you'd be like a sponge around him, wouldn't you?
Well, you would never forget it, would you? You know what I mean? The class he was, and you're completely right in saying, there's only a small group of the elites. There's world class, and then I'd say elite, yeah. And you're looking at a really narrow group of players that can get in there, and he's right at the top, I think, of that pyramid.
Absolutely. Moving on, Chris, we are staying in South America, but this man, another fantastic player over the years, watching Serie A on Channel 4 here in the UK.
Ah, yes.
Here he
I
is,
love
the man,
that kit
another
as
guy who
well.
could score goals out of nothing. Again, he was with Fiorentina for so many years, wasn't he? Until
Yeah,
he
Batistuta was,
moved
yeah.
on to Inter Milan, Roma. He was very, very loyal to Fiorentina. And I remember the Champions League game when Arsenal were playing at Wembley. They were playing their games there, weren't they? That one where he hits it into the roof of the net and it went in. And he was on like a weird angle coming into goal. And it was just the finish, like David Seaman couldn't get near it. And that's just, you can pick out loads of goals by Gabriel Batistuta.
Well, again, Stuart, I'd say world class. I mean, he's very close to an elite level, but he was world class. And you're right with Fiorentina, and the picture you're showing right now, and for audio viewers, it was the one where they had Nintendo as a sponsor, and I always loved that kit. I think Nintendo have never sponsored another football team since then. Actually, I'm sure of it. But yeah, amazing. And I remember that Arsenal game; he terrorised them. And I think it was the art. He was an artist as well. You know what I mean? He's another one that you only have to give him half a chance and he's banging it in. And he wasn't blessed with pace, though, was he? But it was the knowledge and then how to beat a man without using the pace. Marking his own a defender out of the game. I mean, he just knew where the goal was, and that's another one. I think you look back and think there's not enough strikers like Gabriel Batistuta either. I think you look at the type of strikers now, they have to have everything, don't they? Where I think Batistuta, as I said, didn't have the pace, but I mean, the knowledge of what to do with the ball, or how to get in front of a defender, when the ball's coming in.
He was 31 when he went to Roma. They hadn't had a league title in 18 years when he went there. And then they won it. They won the league when he went there. Obviously, I know they had the other players. I know Totti was prevalent in that team.
De Rossi
they
as well.
They had the players, but I think he got like 20 league goals, 21 league goals that year. So they got their league championship for the first time in 18 years. And it was a big move, that. And then obviously he was at Inter Milan as well. But I think internationally as well, his record speaks for itself. What he managed to do for Argentina as well. But it was all number of goals. He was outside the box. We're saying about these strikers. He could hit it. He could hit it from 25, 30 yards. Pinpoint accuracy. I was watching like the different goals he scored. So many different types of goals in the box, out the box. Just he could do it all again. I think another one. We talk about him, say how good he is, but I think underrated as well. Again, don't think he gets enough credit. But I mean, I know there was so many players in that era, Chris. We could pick, hundreds of players, couldn't we?
He was a good-looking man as well, wasn't he, Gabriel Batistuta?
Yeah,
he had that South American, look at me, look, But yeah, I think he's another player. Like, I think you can say that you don't hear enough about now. No one goes back and associates Batistuta, do they? When it comes to Argentina, yourself and everyone else who's listening to this or watching it, it's Messi, isn't it? But there was tons of players before Messi that come through the Argentinian ranks and broke through in Europe, and yeah, he was dangerous, and I think Fiorentina did really well for the amount of years they held on to him, because he was double figures every season for Fiorentina, and he was there for a long time.
Such a good player, just unreal what he was able to do. And yeah, I just love watching the footage. We're saying about La Liga. I know you watched a lot of La Liga at the time. Me with Serie A, and I'd tape the Italian. I did Gazzetta I would take with my the highlight show every Saturday, and we watch it, wouldn't we? And then I'd watch La Liga at yours on Sky because I didn't have Sky. But even before that, Scorio had the highlights.
Oh yeah, S4C.
Germany. So you could watch all the game. You could watch all the games. Like Scorio used to be fantastic. Germany. I'm thinking you got Italy on there again, and Spain. The Spanish league was on there as well. You don't get that now. They just show the domestic stuff, the Welsh league.
And I think it was you got a more understanding of of each team. I'm not saying not sitting there and watching 90 minutes, but you can't really sit there now and watch 90 minutes every game that's in every country that's on Sky or Amazon or BT. There's a lot to take in, but those snippet shows that we watched, it was enough. You know what I mean? And to find a player that you think, holy hell, he's really good.
No, it was just, I could watch it. I've watched games back from that, games that I remembered. Somewhere Palmer got absolutely hammered, actually, because I followed Palmer at the time. And they had some kickings, but it was later on when they'd come out that time. A lot of the players had gone on. They Thuram, Veron, Crespo had gone. There's another one, Hernan Crespo. The amount of goals. Yeah. And he was in Italy for years, very much like Batistuta, wasn't it? He went and played for other teams. Hernan Crespo, I know we had him at Chelsea in the early 2000s as well, but he was another one, wasn't he? Absolutely ruthless.
But don't forget Palmer. When we were laughing at me on Facebook, and you posted that picture of their team, in the 90s, and that team now would destroy a lot of teams still now, in this day and age. With the amount of top players they had, and they had obviously Buffon as a youth player, didn't they? And and look, Fabio, both Pablo and Fabio Cannavaro.
Alan Bohosian, a player that you don't necessarily hear about, but he was fantastic. Diego Juzar was very good in the middle. But you had your top lads, but they were fantastic. Roberto Sensini as well.
Veron sitting, right behind them.
Veron was fantastic in Italy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It just didn't quite pan out for him over here, did it?
Then does it really? When I said about the comment before about you were envious and jealous of all these players playing in Europe, and then when they did sort of stop coming in, the Premier League was too much. Whether or not it's their age or was it too much money? But when they did come through, Hernan Crespo did okay at Chelsea. He wasn't the player that you and I remember in Italy. Veron being the same player, because when he was in Italy, he was one of the best defensive midfielders, in the game, and he could pass, and he was strong, and not many players could get past him. Gattuso as well. And I obviously remember Gattuso at Rangers and stuff like that. But I don't know what it was when they started coming to the Prem. Maybe it was just too much, and the Prem was starting to, as you say, let fly. And starting to get better.
It became the best, and it wasn't. It didn't happen overnight, as we said earlier. But when they did, and it was testament to them when they were winning Champions Leagues, or there was always an English side in the final. It went on for years, didn't it? Where they had a hell of it. They might not necessarily win it, but they were getting to the finals. There was always an English club in the final, and it just went to show, didn't it, how strong the Prem actually got into the 2000s.
I think they were, if you look at it, they were branching out and getting these young players in from Europe before they, were scattered into Spain and Italy. Obviously we don't get many Brazilians playing in the Premier League. Not like, I'm talking about like the top talent ones, the Rivaldos, Ronaldinhos, the Nielsen's. I loved the Nielsen when he played for Real Betis. Absolutely destroyer on that left wing. But all these sort of players that played there and played in Italy, you didn't get them in the Prem. I know United tried hard for Ronaldinho back in the day when before he went to Barca, didn't he? When he was
Newcastle were linked. Newcastle as well, to a lesser extent, obviously.
But I think they were, when obviously the Premier League was getting better and better, and the more money was coming in, they were plucking Ronaldos, weren't they? From Sporting Lisbon's and the Narnies, and they were getting all these youngsters in beforehand. And I think that integrated with obviously the good English talent that Man United were producing, the Arsenal's producing, Liverpool were producing. It got better, didn't it? And I think everything sort of fused together. But you still, again, when we talk about these players, you still think, I wish you played in the Premier League.
That's it.
I mean, it's a regrettable thing, isn't it? You can do it on Football Manager. You know what I mean? You can mod it and and do things like that. But it's not the same, is it?
It's just, oh man, I love it. I love it. It gets hairs on the back of my neck standing, and I've got a lot of hairs on the back of my neck actually. Need to shave them off. Not very good, but just this has been episode 1, Chris. Very, very much a nostalgic look. I mean, we can cover. There's so many topics that we will cover, and the different times, and obviously we will look at the modern era as well over the course of this show. I think we'll look into stadiums. I think that was a good one, and I know you'll have the stadiums, the iconic ones that you used to like. And when we used to some of them back in the day, I think that'll be great for episode 2.
Yeah, and then, you know what I mean. It's like get the words out. Going forward into the modern days now, and it's another level. For stadiums and the creation and what they look like now. And that's before we even say about Bramley-Moore Dock, because that's going to be an amazing ground. And that's not because we're Evertonians and we're biased, and yes, we are. But the modernization of grounds now, and you see New Camp getting changed. You can just see it now. How amazing these grounds are going to look. But beforehand, I do agree, they were amazing beforehand, and all the modernness that came into the current era.
It's going to be interesting as well. I know there's a lot of renovations in the pipeline. Obviously, Madrid's is all done now, isn't it? They've managed to do it whilst they've been able to play there still, haven't they? When they've been doing it, and obviously in the off season they've done the work. It's fantastic. What a feat by the guys there building that and managing to do it while the team are there. And it does look, with the roof on it now, the retractable roof, it looks amazing and very modern on the outside as well. And as you say, the new camp's going to have a roof right the way around, isn't it? And one of those digital boards going around the top as well, like the LED boards.
Do you not find that's going to be weird? Do you know what I mean? We're so used to the new camp. I know we're going to talk about this in the second episode.
It's a funny one, man. It's a funny one, but we'll definitely go into stadiums old and new.
Yeah, I'll save my question for the next episode.
Absolutely. So Chris, where can the viewers and listeners find you? And
you can find me on Instagram at Van Hume and at Big Fight Weekly that me and you still do, Stu. Same again on Twitter X. I'm still not familiar with saying X. It's just so it doesn't come off the tongue like Twitter does it really? But it's the same there. And then our YouTube channels, you'll find them on there. Yours and mine and Big Fight Weeklies. All under the same name, obviously.
We've got the Instagram page. I've started that. Obviously, we're going to have to build that. And then YouTube, there'll be a YouTube for this as well. I will get that sorted. So, looking forward to it. And it's just great. We love it. We love football so much, Chris. And I think there is a lot of negativity, not just with our club. I think a lot of stuff, some of the stuff I read, Thiago Silva's wife getting involved, saying Pochettino should be sacked. I don't want to make a big thing about that because that's not what we're about. But when has the wife of a player had any substance of getting a manager sacked? It's crazy to me. Couldn't believe what I was reading the other day. What a load of gobbledygook.
Yeah, but then that happened with, not like getting sacked, but do you remember how close we were signing Olivier Giroud from Arsenal, and Koeman was in charge, and his wife didn't want to go to Liverpool from London, so obviously he signed for Chelsea instead. Yeah.
Just how it is, isn't it?
You just shush him off and let him go play his football wherever he wants.
Just the way it is. So, this has been episode 1 of Football Then and Now, a nostalgic look at football intertwined with the modern game, the beautiful game that we all know and love. And we'll be back for episode 2 very, very shortly. And please listen to us on the audio platforms. Will be available on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. There's so many to mention, Chris, isn't there?
Sports Social website as well, the Sports Social Network.
Yes, all housed there. Yeah, we're on board with them guys who we've got a lot of time for, have been fantastic with us with our other shows. So, we look forward to episode 2 with you. And take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon.